And what if I told you that the burden you've carried since childhood isn't a coincidence? A woman died in a hospital, and Jesus revealed to her why firstborn daughters carry so much and why heaven sees them in a way no one else does. My name is Gabriella Fernanda Morales Reyes. I'm 75 years old and have lived in Toronto, Canada, for over 40 years. I arrived here as a young single mother with 2 small daughters, fleeing a life of poverty in Guadalajara, Jalisco, seeking a better future for my girls. What I never imagined is that years later, in this same city where I built my life, I would die on a hospital bed, and Jesus would show me something that would forever change everything I thought I knew about being a firstborn. I need to tell you this because what Jesus revealed to me that day isn't just for me, it's for every firstborn daughter who has ever felt the crushing weight of being born first, for every woman who grew up being a mother to her siblings before she had the chance to be a child herself, for all who carried responsibilities they never asked for and kept silent because that's what they were taught to do. I was born in 1950 on a small ranch near Guadalajara. I was the first child in a family that would later have 7 more children. My mother's name was Maria del Carmen, and my father was a day laborer. He worked in the fields from sunrise to sunset, earning barely enough to eat. For as long as I can remember, I was the one who took care of my younger siblings. By the age of 6, I was already changing cloth diapers, washing them in the river, carrying buckets of water on my head because we didn't have running water in the house. By the age of 8, I was cooking beans and tortillas for the whole family while my mother went to the market to sell flowers. At 10, I already knew how to chop wood, light the stove, sweep the dirt floor, take care of the chickens, and make sure my little brothers didn't go near the well. I never played with dolls because my dolls were my brothers and sisters of flesh and blood. I never had a childhood because my childhood was being a mother before my time. I remember perfectly when I was 11 and my mother had my brother Jesus Manuel. She was very sick after giving birth with very high fevers and I was left in charge of everything. There were 5 of us children in the house at that time, and I was the one who fed them. I bathed them, put them to sleep, and comforted them when they cried. My father came home so tired from the fields that he barely ate and fell asleep. Nobody asked me if I could handle all of that. It was simply assumed that I could because I was the oldest, because that's how things work. Because firstborn daughters are born with an invisible mandate tattooed on their souls that says we are responsible for making everything work even if we are dying inside. I grew up with that burden. When I turned 15, I didn't have a quinceanera like other girls in town. That money was needed to buy medicine for my sister Rosa Elena, who got sick with her lungs. I didn't say anything, I just lowered my head and kept working. At 17, I met a man at the market. I fell in love quickly, too quickly, because he was the first one who treated me as if I was special, as if I mattered beyond what I could do for others. He got me pregnant at 18 and disappeared before our daughter was born. My family rejected me. My father kicked me out of the house, telling me I had brought shame to the Morales name. My mother cried, but said nothing to defend me. My younger siblings, those I raised as if they were my own, looked at me with disappointment. I went to live with an aunt in the city who gave me a small room in exchange for me to help her with her children, so I continued being a nanny, continued being the one who carries everything, but now with my own baby in my arms. My daughter's name was Andrea Gabriella. 2 years later I had another girl, Valeria Sofia, with another man who also promised to stay and also left. I was 20 years old and already felt like I was 100. I was already broken inside, tired of carrying everything alone, but I couldn't afford to break down because I had 2 mouths to feed, and no one else was going to do it for me. I worked cleaning houses, washing other people's clothes, selling tamales on the street. I saved every peso I could for 3 years until I had enough to pay for the trip to Canada. Someone told me there were opportunities there, that I could work legally there and give my daughters what I never had. I arrived in Toronto in 1973 without speaking a word of English, with 2 scared little girls holding my hands and $300 in my pocket. I got a job cleaning offices at night. During the day I took care of the girls and took free English classes at the library. I slept 4 hours a day. I lived on bread and coffee so my daughters could eat well. The first few years in Canada were the hardest of my life. I missed Mexico with a physical pain in my chest. I missed Spanish, the food, the sun. I even missed my family, even though they had rejected me. But I couldn't go back. There was nothing to go back to. I had to get ahead or die trying, and so I did. Little by little, things improved. I learned enough English to get a better job in a factory. Later, I became a Canadian citizen. My daughters grew up, went to school, and graduated from university. Andrea became an accountant, and Valeria a nurse. They both married good men and gave me beautiful grandchildren. I felt proud of having raised them on my own, of having given them a life I never dreamed of having, but something inside me never healed. That feeling of always being in survival mode never went away. Even though things improved financially, I was still the one carrying the load. When Andrea had problems in her marriage, I was the one who advised her, the one who took care of her children while she went to therapy. When Valeria had postpartum depression with her third baby, I moved into her house for 2 months to help her. When my sister Socorro in Mexico got cancer, I was the one who sent money every month for her treatments. Even though it meant I couldn't retire when I wanted, it was always me, always the oldest, always the strong one, always the one who can't break, because if I break, everything falls apart. Over the years, I developed chronic anxiety. I would wake up in the middle of the night with my heart racing, thinking about everything I had to figure out, about everyone who depended on me. I took sleeping pills, I took blood pressure pills, I took pills for the constant headaches. The doctors told me I needed to rest, to lower my stress. But how could I do that when so many people needed me? I didn't know how to say no, I didn't know how to set boundaries, I didn't know how to take care of myself, because all my life I was taught that my worth was in how much I could give, how much I could endure, how much I could sacrifice for others. 2 years ago I started feeling unwell, very tired, with body aches and pains, and dizziness. I went to the doctor and they ran tests. It turned out I had heart problems, blocked arteries, and uncontrolled high blood pressure. The cardiologist told me I needed to change my lifestyle or I was going to end up having a heart attack. I said yes. I told myself I was going to take better care of myself, but the truth is, I didn't change anything. I kept doing everything I always did. I continued being the rock of the family. I kept pretending I was okay when I wasn't. Then that day came, an ordinary day, nothing special. I got up early, as usual. I made my coffee, checked my phone to see if anyone in the family needed anything. I felt more tired than usual, but I didn't think much of it. I was about to go grocery shopping when suddenly I felt a terrible pain in my chest, like someone was squeezing my heart with a giant hand. I couldn't breathe. My legs buckled and I fell to the kitchen floor. I managed to scream, and my neighbor, who thankfully was outside watering her plants, heard me and called an ambulance. The next thing I remember is being in the hospital surrounded by doctors and nurses speaking fast in English, hooking up wires, putting in IVs. The pain was unbearable. I remember thinking I was going to die, that this was the end for me, and all I felt was a deep sadness, because I had never lived for myself. I had always lived for others. I had never taken those vacations I dreamed of. I had never traveled just for pleasure. I had never bought that expensive dress I liked in the store. I had never given myself permission to be happy without feeling guilty. And now my time was running out and I wasn't going to be able to do any of that anymore. Then everything went dark. I felt like I was sinking into a cold, black tunnel. I was scared, very scared. But suddenly the darkness turned into light, not normal light like sunlight or a lamp. It was a living light, warm, that completely enveloped me and made me feel a peace I had never experienced in my entire life. There was no more pain, no more fear, only that immense peace that filled my whole being. And then I saw him. I saw Jesus standing in front of me. I can't explain how I knew it was him. He didn't look like the images I had seen in churches or on holy cards. He didn't have a long beard or a white robe, but I knew it was him the same way you know you're breathing, the same way you know your own name. It was a knowledge that came from the very depths of my soul. His eyes looked at me with such a pure, such a complete love, that I began to cry uncontrollably, because in those eyes I saw every tear I had secretly shed, every time I went to bed hungry so my daughters could eat, every time I smiled when I wanted to scream, every time I said I was okay when I was dying inside. Jesus didn't say hello or ask how I was, he simply told me in a voice that it was like, and thunder. At the same time, Gabriella, do you know why being the firstborn has been so hard on you? And there I broke down completely, because in 75 years of life, no one, absolutely no one, had ever asked me that question. No one had acknowledged that what I carried was heavy. Everyone simply assumed that I was strong, that I could handle anything, that that's what I was there for. But no one ever stopped to ask me if I was drowning under that weight. I told Jesus between sobs yes, I knew it had been a burden. I told him everything. I told him how, since I was 6 years I was a mother to my siblings. I told him how I sacrificed my education, my dreams, my youth so they could have something better. I told him how I left Mexico rejected and alone with 2 babies in my arms. I told him how I worked myself to the point of exhaustion for decades to give them a decent life. I told him how, even now as an older woman, I was still the one who solved everyone's problems. I told him that I was tired, so tired, that sometimes I wished I could disappear just to rest. Jesus listened to me without interrupting, and when I finished, he simply nodded as if he had been there seeing everything, as if he had counted every tear I shed when no one was watching. Then he said something that made my whole soul tremble. He told me, Gabriella, you weren't placed first by accident, you were positioned first for a purpose, and I need you to understand what that means before you come back. Come back? I asked, confused. But I'm dead, how am I going to come back? Jesus didn't answer that question directly. Instead, he began to show me things. It wasn't like watching a movie. It was as if he was putting knowledge directly into my spirit, opening my eyes to see truths that were always there, but that I had never had the words to understand. He showed me the Garden of Eden first and said, do you see the pattern, Gabriella? From the very beginning, the enemy has attacked what comes first. Cain was the firstborn of all humanity, and the enemy whispered in his ear. He planted seeds of jealousy, made him feel that he wasn't enough, that his offering wasn't worthwhile, that God preferred his younger brother, and Cain ended up killing Abel because he couldn't handle the weight of being first. I saw it not as a distant vision, but as if I were right there. I saw how the enemy worked in Cain's mind, twisting his thoughts, making him believe lies about his own worth, and I understood something I had never understood before. Being first means that you are the first to be tested, the first to face spiritual warfare, the first to hear the enemy's lies about your worth. Jesus looked at me with an intensity that pierced me and he said, every firstborn daughter throughout history has felt what you felt. The pressure, the responsibility, the burden of keeping everyone together while you fall apart inside. That's not by chance, Gabriella, that's spiritual. Then he showed me Leah, Jacob's first wife, the one no one wanted, the one who was tricked into marrying a man who loved her younger sister, Rachel. Jesus said to me, look at what the world saw. They saw rejection. They saw second choice. They saw someone unwanted. But look what I saw, and suddenly I could see it through her eyes. Leah wasn't rejected by God. Leah was chosen by God. In Genesis 29 verse 31 it says that when the Lord saw that Leah wasn't loved, he opened her womb and through Leah, not Rachel, came Judah, the tribe of kings, the lineage that would eventually lead to Jesus himself. Jesus told me, the rejected firstborn daughter became the root of redemption, Gabriella, because I don't choose those in the spotlight, I choose those who surrender. I don't choose the favorites, I choose the faithful. I was crying so hard at that moment because all my life I had felt like Leah, like the one they chose because there was no other option, like the reliable one, the responsible one. But never the favorite, never the one anyone would choose first if they could. And Jesus just held my hand and said, you were never unloved by me, you were set apart by me. Then he showed me Miriam, the sister of Moses, and said, everyone remembers Moses parting the Red Sea, everyone remembers Aaron, the priest, but who was watching over baby Moses in that basket floating down the Nile? Who was brave enough to approach Pharaoh's daughter? who led the praise with a tambourine after the waters closed over the Egyptian army. It was Miriam, the firstborn daughter, who saw deliverance coming before anyone else. Jesus told me, firstborn daughters are watchful. Gabriella, you see storms coming before the sky changes, you sense tension before others even notice it, you perceive when something is wrong in your family, in your church, in your friendships. That's not anxiety, that's prophetic sensitivity, that's discernment that I placed in you, because you are meant to be on guard. I thought about all the times I'd been called paranoid, overly cautious, too sensitive, too worried, and Jesus was telling me that what others called overthinking. He called intercession. He showed me more. He showed me how in Numbers 12 it's recorded that when Miriam and Aaron defied Moses, only Miriam was struck with leprosy, and Jesus explained to me, she wasn't punished more severely because she was worse, she was held to a higher standard because she was a leader, because firstborn daughters carry authority, whether they recognize that or not. And then Jesus said something that absolutely shattered me. He said to me, Gabriella, do you know why your life has been a constant battle? Do you know why the enemy has come against your mind, your courage, your identity, your peace? I shook my head because I didn't know. He said to me, because the enemy attacks what's first, because I use what's first. And suddenly he was showing me Exodus 1. Pharaoh wasn't afraid of Israel until he saw them multiplying. Then he issued an order to kill all the firstborn Hebrew males. Jesus told me this wasn't just population control, this was a spiritual blow against destiny. Because firstborns carry legacy, they carry direction, they are the seed of future movements. Then he showed me Herod's decree in Matthew chapter 2, when he heard that the Messiah had been born, he sent orders to kill all male children under the age of 2. Jesus said, you see the pattern. Hell is terrified of what is born first, because it's often what I use to set the rest free. I felt like I couldn't breathe, though I guess I wasn't breathing anyway, because technically I was dead. Jesus looked at me so intently and said, you weren't just born first in your family, Gabriella, you were born first in the spirit to change something, to break cycles, to carry a mantle, to break generational bonds. That's why the enemy attacked your mind when you were young. That's why he attacked your worth. That's why he tried to destroy your identity before you even understood you had won. I thought about my childhood, the depression that hit me at 12, the anxiety that haunted me in my teens, the constant feeling that I wasn't enough, the voice that told me I was a burden, the shame I carried for needing help. And Jesus said to me, those weren't just mental health issues, those were spiritual attacks. If you weren't a threat, the enemy wouldn't have attacked you like that. Then he showed me something about his own life, and this is where I really broke down. Jesus said to me, Gabriella, I am called the firstborn over all creation in Colossians 1 verse 15, the firstborn from the dead in Revelation 1 verse 5. The firstborn among many brothers in Romans 8 verse 29. Do you know what that means? I didn't. I had read those verses before, but I had never truly understood them. He said to me, it means that I walked the path of the firstborn before you. I understand the burden you carry. I was the first to be misunderstood, the first to be falsely accused, the first to bear sin that wasn't mine, the first to open heaven for everyone else. He paused and let the sink in. Then he said, I carried the cross not because it was my burden, but because it was yours, and that's what you've done too, haven't you? You've carried things your brothers and sisters never knew about. You've borne the emotional and spiritual weight of your family. You've bled in silence and kept going anyway. I couldn't even speak. I just nodded. Jesus said, but here's the redemption, Gabriella. I redeem what I myself lived through. Your role as the firstborn daughter is not a curse. It's not a mistake. It's a calling, and in me it is filled with grace. He quoted Hebrews 12 verse 23 to me about how we have come to the congregation of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven, and said to me, there is a place for you, a recognition, an honor that heaven gives to those who carried more than the most. I asked him, why? Why does it have to be this way? Why do firstborn daughters have to carry so much? And Jesus showed me something about inheritance. He showed me how in the Old Testament the firstborn son received a double portion not only of wealth, but of inheritance, influence, and impact. He told me that this same principle applies spiritually to firstborn daughters. You carry a double portion of discernment, influence, and intercession. Your prayers hit differently, Gabriella. Your presence brings peace even if you don't realize it. People come to you when they are falling apart because, whether you know it or not, you have been interceding for years. Then Jesus showed me all the times I prayed with tears, all the times I broke cycles by saying no to dysfunction, all the times I stepped away from comfort to obey God, and he said, each of those moments you were exercising spiritual authority. You are a gatekeeper, you change atmospheres, you break chains with your prayers. He showed me Mary Magdalene as she was the first to see him resurrected, the first to carry the message that he was alive. Jesus told me, I trusted a woman, not a disciple, not a priest, to proclaim resurrection to the world. That's what I do with my daughters. I don't just heal them, I commission them. Then Jesus showed me why my life had been so difficult. Specifically, he showed me Dinah, the daughter of Jacob and Leah. Her story is tragic. She was raped, silenced, her brothers reacted with rage, her father said almost nothing, her voice is lost in the scriptures, but Jesus said her pain was recorded. I didn't edit it. Do you know why? Because I don't waste pain, especially the pain of the firstborn. He told me that the enemy often attacks the firstborn daughter because she carries a seed that threatens hell. He said, you are a threat, Gabriella, you are a builder. You are a restorer of long devastated places. He quoted Isaiah 58 verse 12 to me about being a repairer of breaches, a restorer of streets to dwell in. And he said, sometimes that means you are the first to walk through the rubble, but it also means you are the first to plant again. Jesus showed me Deborah, one of the greatest leaders in Israel, a warrior, a prophetess, a judge, and when Barak was too afraid to step forward, Deborah did not hesitate. Jesus told me, that is the mantle of a firstborn spirit. You go into places others flee from, you carry burdens others ignore, you rebuild what others have abandoned. I asked him about all the pain, all the brokenness. Why did God allow it? Jesus told me, your trauma doesn't disqualify you, it equips you. Your brokenness isn't your end, it's your blueprint, because the first to be broken is often the first to be rebuilt. And when I rebuild through you, I build something that generations will never forget. He showed me Jephthah's daughter. Her name isn't even given in the scriptures, but her sacrifice is eternal. After her father made a rash vow, she became the price of his victory. And when she heard what he had promised, she said, my father, if you have given your word to the Lord, do with me as you have promised. Jesus told me, that's not weakness, that's devotion. Firstborn daughters often bear the cost of others' victories. They sacrifice in silence, giving up dreams so that others can succeed. They hold the line while others enjoy blessings. But don't mistake sacrifice for insignificance. He told me that his surrender mirrored his own as the firstborn of all creation, who gave his life for the sake of the Father's will. Then Jesus showed me Hannah, how she wept and prayed and made a vow, and when God gave her Samuel, she gave him back. Jesus told me, that's the pattern, the first belongs to God. That's why the firstborn were consecrated in Exodus, that's why the first fruits were offered, that's why I take what comes first and mark it as mine. He looked at me so seriously and said, you were born first not to be a burden, but to be dedicated, to set the tone, to shape the family, to open spiritual doors that were sealed. I realized I was crying again because all my life I felt like the burden was a punishment, like I had done something wrong to deserve carrying so much, but Jesus was telling me it was purpose. He said, if you've felt like your life has been a constant offering, if it seems like your story is full of things you had to let go of, things you had to walk away from or give up, it's because you're walking in a prophetic pattern. He showed me the widow in 1 Kings 17. She only had a handful of flour and a little oil. But she gave her first loaf to the prophet Elijah and the jar never ran dry. Jesus told me, when you offer first, I respond with overflowing. Then he said something I'll never forget. He told me, Gabriella, you may not have a platform, you may not have applause, but you have a pattern from heaven, and when I see that in you, I release things through you that will outlive you. He told me that firstborn daughters aren't just women with a story, they're women with a prophetic purpose. I asked him, what did he want me to do with all this? What was the point of showing me all this if I was dead? And Jesus smiled. She really smiled at me and said, you're not staying here, Gabriella, you're coming back because there are millions of firstborn daughters who need to hear what I just told you. They need to know they're not crazy, they're not weak, they're not cursed, they're called. She told me it's time for them to stop just surviving and start stepping into who they truly are. They were never just the eldest, they were chosen to be the first to move, the first to intercede, the first to break the silence, the first to bring healing to their bloodline. Jesus looked at me with such intensity and said, the pain you have carried, the pressure you have endured, the silence you have learned to live with, is not the end of your story, it is evidence of your anointing. He told me that firstborn daughters are not just part of the family, they are pillars in it. They don't just carry the name, they carry the mantle. Jesus told me that they were never meant to remain invisible, they were meant to have an impact. I am calling you out of hiding, out of acting, out of survival mode, out of the guilt that says you should have done more. He told me it was time to take ownership of the called, time to say yes to leadership, even when no one is applauding, time to speak truth even when others remain silent, time to set boundaries, even when it makes people uncomfortable, time to stop shrinking because other people don't know how to handle their strength. Jesus told me they were the firstborn for a reason, not because they were the most prepared, not because they were the most perfect, but because I knew that if I placed the mantle on them, they wouldn't let go. I knew they would pray even when no one else believed. I knew they would protect even when they needed protection. I knew they would keep standing even when everyone else left. Then he told me he was calling them higher. The world needs firstborn daughters who not only heal in private, but lead publicly, who not only carry burdens, but release blessings. Let them not only weep in silence, but prophesy boldly. They are not weak, Jesus told me, they are not replaceable, they are not just the older sister, they are the women I chose to go first, and going first is never easy, but it is always worth it. He told me that they set the standard, raise the temperature, change the atmosphere. Jesus looked at me once more and said, tell them to rise up, not only in strength, but in spirit, so that the generations behind them see what it looks like to walk in anointed authority, so that they see what it means to be called first and still be faithful. He told me that they are not just carrying the weight of their family, they are carrying heaven's assignment, and when heaven sees a firstborn daughter rise up, hell trembles. Then Jesus said the last thing before I returned. She told me, I don't forget those who came first, I don't overlook the tears they cried when no one saw them, I don't ignore the strength they had to find when no one offered help, I don't minimize the prayers they whispered when they didn't even have words. She told me they were the first to forgive, the first to believe, the first to carry faith when the family lost it. They may not have had a role model, but they became one, and I honor that. Jesus told me, heaven records their legacy, not only for what they endured, but for what they brought forth through it. They were born first for a reason, told me, not just to carry burdens, but to carry progress. And then everything turned white, brighter than anything I had ever seen, even in that place of light, and I heard my daughter Andrea screaming my name, I heard machines whirring frantically, I heard the doctor shouting, she's back. It has a pulse. I opened my eyes on that hospital bed, gasping for air. They told me later that my heart had stopped. They had been close to declaring me dead, but Jesus sent me back, because this message isn't just for me, it's for you, it's for every firstborn daughter reading this right now, who has felt invisible, overwhelmed, overburdened, and overlooked. You are not forgotten, you are not average. You are called, you are chosen, you are equipped, and everything you have carried, everything you have endured, is about to make sense, because you weren't placed first by accident, you were positioned first with purpose. The Bible reminds us in Isaiah chapter 58, verse 12, your people will rebuild the ancient ruins, you will raise up the foundations for all generations, you will be called repairer of broken walls, restorer of streets with dwellings, To you who listen to this testimony until the end, especially if you are a firstborn daughter and have lived feeling invisible, tired, or overwhelmed, listen to this clearly. Heaven saw every sacrifice, every tear shed in silence, every time you were strong when you really needed rest. You weren't placed first by accident, you were positioned first with a purpose. May the peace of God heal what the weight of the years has damaged. May you release guilt today, receive rest, and walk with the certainty that your story has meaning, value, and destiny. Thank you for joining us until the end. May God bless your life, strengthen your spirit, and remind you every day who you are in Him. See you next time.